Magic is found in every room, where people connect over a shared purpose. In this weekly podcast, Luke, Hannah and Chris explore the role of purpose, courage, mindset and culture in every leader's quest for transformational performance.
Hello and welcome to Magic in the Room. I'm Hannah Broadroot.
And I'm Chris Province.
And I'm Luke Freeman. And we are, excited. I feel a little nostalgic as well today to be wrapping up our series that we've done this year for season 4. Has all been about leading yourself. It's all been about intentional leadership and this idea that if we think intentionally, notice things in our own lives that could be managed differently, right? That good things happen. And so today's our wrap-up episode. And it's been really fun. It's definitely been the most intentional season that we've had here on Magic in the Room. But today we're going to kind of close it the way that we would prescribe people learn anything, with some reflection on what stands out. So just as a reminder, we've had several different topics, kind of monthly topics. And each month we've had 3 or 4 episodes about that topic. So we started with what is intentional leadership? And then we talked about our unique experiences and personalities drive our leadership style. And then we talked about kind of the third one was digging into our strengths. And then the fourth one was identifying our values. What are the unique, authentic values that each of us hold? How does that drive our leadership behavior, how we show up? The 5th month, we talked about mindset, how we can have a mindset that is outward focused towards other people and also comfortable with growth, not just a fixed mindset. Our 6th topic was survival strategies. So kind of knowing what our go-tos were whenever the chips are down and things get tough. What are those habits of our mind, habits of our body whenever things get tough, and how do we notice those and become more intentional? And then number 7 was our unique contribution and our unique purpose. So what's the context that we're in? What is the outcome that we are most passionate about in the world, right? If all of our goal is to leave this world a little bit better place, what does that look like specifically for us? And then our 8th topic was well-being, and then hope. So really we ended the last couple months with how do we keep leadership change, a leadership journey sustainable? How do we understand and manage our own well-being? And then in times that are hard, how do we not become nihilistic, not become jaded, but actually fuel our own hope and manage our own hope and keep it alive as well? So that's where we've been. We have a downloadable reflection guide for each of those topics at magicintheroom.com. If you haven't listened to any of those kind of chapters of this season, you can always go back and listen to those. But today we're going to jump into some reflection, our takeaways.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Luke. And I think, as we kind of put the wraps here on another season, I really love what you said about reflection in where learning actually comes from. Like, we don't necessarily learn while we're in the classroom or while we experience life today. We learn tomorrow when we reflect on what we learned in the classroom. We learn tomorrow when we reflect on what happens today. And it's really why I'm so thankful for this podcast, because we get to reflect on these topics. And when we spend the time and I get to have these wonderful conversations with you all, like, this is also my process of learning as well. So it's why I'm grateful for it. I'm also just thankful that our listeners find some level of value in it as we go through it. So I'd like to encourage everyone, like, if you've been thinking about starting your own podcast, it's not about how many people smash the like button or follow or even download. There is intense value in us having conversations. And so if you're out there thinking like, I want to write a book, I want to do a podcast, it will be the richest learning experience that I think anyone can have. So I just want to encourage our listeners to go out there and do those things that they see. But in our reflection on the season, I mean, we're talking about a year that we've spent talking about intentional leadership and how is it constructed and what are the parts and how do we activate it, and some really awesome guests that activate these functions within their own lives. And I want to play with some primary and recency bias and really lean into, I want to start with the beginning and the end, and maybe how one leads to the other. So, Luke, if you wouldn't mind, can you run us through like what is intentional leadership?
Yeah. And this is one thing that for us going through this, I've been using this model for, I don't know, probably a decade in, just answering the question, what is leadership? But for us, talking about it so often this year has really helped me internalize it more and more. But really, we would just say it's doing three things. One is noticing something that could be better. That could be something in the world. That could be something internally to us. What is something that I notice? And then can I take myself off autopilot for a minute? And the second part of intentional leadership is making an intentional choice. So I've noticed something. Now, what am I going to do about that? I'm going to actually reflect and think about it and weigh my options a little bit. And then the third step is just having the courage to act. So a lot of folks will churn around and around. Oh, I see these things that could be better, and here's what I think should happen. But actually having the courage to go in and make the change is that third part of intentional leadership. And what we love about this and why we use this with our clients and with participants in programs is because it takes leadership from being a positionally dependent word to being something that anyone can do. I can notice a piece of trash on the ground, choose not to be on autopilot and just walk by, choose not to say that's someone else's problem, choose to think about what behavior here would align with my values, and then actually have the courage to undertake a little bit of inconvenience and pick it up, right? It goes for really small things and really big things too. How am I showing up in a meeting? How am I leading one-on-ones with my direct reports? Whatever those things are, I can use the same model and apply it to them.
Yeah. And what I've found is, as we keep talking about it and keep having this model kind of front of mind, looking at life through this lens has been really helpful for me, right? And so even in all the other programs and contexts that we teach and interact with our client partners, organizational leaders, with this foundational belief that everybody is a leader, and the sooner they accept that, the better the organization becomes, the better their journey becomes. So teaching people how to be intentional in leading from where they are, whether they have a formal title with positional authority or not, everybody can lead in this way. So whether we're talking about guest service and hospitality, when you take on this mindset of I am a leader because I have influence because I notice things and I can choose how I respond to them. I notice things in myself. I notice my own emotional state and how it impacts other people. And when I notice that, I can choose how I show up and how I adjust, because I can choose what kind of influence I have by what kind of influence, or by what kind of energy that I share and spread, right? So whether it's guest service or operations or any other functional area that we're in, adopting this model of intentional leadership at every level has been really pretty transformational.
Absolutely. And that's, why we like to say, like, our level of performance will only rise to our level of intention. That's it. Like those things ride side by side all day long, every day. And really embracing this idea, like behavior follows structure. It's for me, like, it's nearly impossible to be intentional about behavior for behavior's sake, because we're wired right? We're wired to respond certain ways, and it requires incredibly aware interventions to not respond in natural ways or to not do things in natural ways. And that natural wiring of me first, I eat first, I'm warm first, I have shelter first, I live first, is that natural wiring combined with so we have a little bit of that inward mindset wired in, and then you combine that with I'm a survivalist, so don't spend energy on things that I shouldn't be spending it on, so I can run from the bear. So between that inward mindset being pre-wired and the conserve your energy being pre-wired, as it is in every human, it's structure. Structure is what we follow to change behavior. Behavior follows structure. And that's been, when we talk about why does performance and intention ride side by side, is because intention is about creating structures. And my other kind of, what is it? Why does it matter? If I can notice, choose, and act on anything I identify as valuable, then I can become a champion of hope, because I notice tomorrow can be better. In fact, I notice everything can be better. And over the course of this year, I give myself permission to not be okay, to not be complacent, to not say that's good enough because someone else thinks something is done. Like, I'm not going to be, I will celebrate the wins that we achieve, but I'm never going to be satisfied.
Yeah.
And complacent. And I think that, we talk about that being a moral imperative, but if I notice anything can be better that I value, that I notice tomorrow can be better, I can choose to make that so, and be courageous enough to action or build structures that create a space for tomorrow that I make an impact. My world continues to get better because I build structure.
Yeah.
And that's where we have, like, activating hope is about noticing tomorrow can be better. I know, Hannah, it's been a topic in like every workshop we've done in, the last, 6 months.
Yeah.
Tell me, like, how all that has impacted your approach as you reflect on this year, because it's more of our dialogue than it's ever been. And it's more in our work than it ever has.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were talking, there's one other kind of related concept that comes to my mind that I think influences all of this. And it's the idea that we can choose our focus, right? Where our focus goes is where our energy goes. Where our focus and intention goes is where energy flows. So if we notice that something could be better, there could be more hope, there maybe is a lot of cynicism going around, we notice that maybe things aren't what they could be, we can choose to put our focus on that there's, everything is so negative. And then we become more negative, right? Because we have also a negativity bias in our brains, right? Chris, you mentioned some of the hardwiring that we have. We're also hardwired to look for threats. Our brains' number one job is to keep us safe. So it's very vigilant about anything that could potentially be harmful or bad. So that's where our brains tend to dwell unless we are intentional about shifting our focus. So I think for me, and how this shows up in my work and how I communicate with people and audiences in different places and different stations in life, is you can't always choose your circumstances or what happens to you in life, but we can always choose our response, and we can choose our focus, right? And when we become intentional about how we respond to events, rather than just use our default reaction, that's when we as leaders can transform our own lives and the lives of others. And so just playing with that concept and interacting with people in this way has been really, really interesting, right? So wherever I find myself having these conversations, right? Different places in the country, different organizations, all kinds of different roles and contexts, when we have these conversations about that level of intentionality, it can be really transformative, both for how we show up and the kind of influence we can have wherever we find ourselves.
Yeah, it's this season for me has been a reminder that our point of leverage is us. Like we are the people that we have the most control over. And if we want things to be better, like we are the answers. The answer is inside us. But the only way to get there, because of some of the things you mentioned, Chris, our biases towards energy conservation, our biases towards getting our own needs met, if we don't have times for reflection built in, times to do the noticing and the choosing and change our course of action, it's really difficult to get out of that autopilot. And so it's almost like a part of us is the biggest enemy or the biggest obstacle to intentional leadership, but we're also the answer to that obstacle. And we do some storytelling training and workshops, and one of the story archetypes that we've learned, the title of it is called, the enemy was us. All along, the enemy was calling from inside the house, is kind of this archetype of how you frame a story about change. And I think that one applies to leadership. One thing that I believe is true is that no system can rise to a level of maturity higher than that of its most senior leader. And so if I believe that's true, I have to start with myself. Whoever I'm talking to, whatever meeting I'm leading, whatever project I'm leading, whatever system I'm in, I can't expect it to perform at a level higher than in maturity than where I have achieved or grown to, and so that means that our only hope for a better tomorrow is reflection.
Yeah, I heard my friend Karen Lum, who has been on this podcast as well, just the other day, talk about reflection. We were doing a year on reflection, and she talked about how it's in the reflection that we grow and that we build our confidence, because it's that's how we learn the truth of who we are and what we're capable of. And if we never stop and reflect on that, we can so easily get trapped in, all the things that didn't go as we hoped, or all the shortcomings that we might be perceiving in ourselves and others on a day-to-day basis. But when we're intentional about reflecting about what we learned, we can recognize that we're learning and growing constantly, and we can connect our confidence in leadership to that.
No, I love what you said, Luke. Senior leader intent, right? What is its role? It sets the ceiling for the maturity and performance of any system. And I've really been leaning on the Drucker quote lately. Like, the only things that happen organically in organizations are friction, chaos, and underperformance. Everything else requires intention, leadership, action, vision, right? But everything we make happen that's good starts with intent. I think about organizational climate. We set the intent for our purposes. Values set the intent or the intention for how we go about our work. Onboarding, performance management, offboarding, recognition, corrective action, things that provide proper orientation to every person in an organization and point our eyes towards performance require intention. If we are not intentional about our performance management processes, what will they create? Underperformance. So getting this lens on literally everything that we do is the unlock to making organizations perform better. Intention is the key that we carry. We see a hope for tomorrow that can be better. We have the courage to act. The key I hold in my hand is intention. So if I'm going to unlock the potential of individuals, teams, or organizations, this is the key I have to carry. And that's what I hope people take away from this season, is you already have the key. You already have the key to unlock a better version of tomorrow, to make whatever impact that we want to make. We have the key. Heard Dylan speak. Like, we already have the things we need. We have to go do. But a lot of people know what you need to do or what I need to do, but they don't know how to do it. And that's, I know the function of our business is really to span that bridge, right? We connect what we need to do to how we actually do it. And what I think we've tried to share this season, what I hope people take away, is trying to share and give people the keys to do, and not just look at it and go, man, I wish that could be better.
Yeah, I'm proud of this season because, more than anything else, the reflection guides that have gone along with the episodes. And I really think it would be hard to go through a reflection guide on, our 9-10 topics and not have a set of keys that you didn't have before. Because people say, yeah, I want to be a good leader. But what does that mean? And how do I do that? Like, providing a methodology. Yeah, I feel really good about that. And for me, when I think back about these, like applying this methodology even to myself, even as we talked through all these episodes, has been incredibly helpful. And just some highlights for me from the season: really getting more clear language about how our survival strategies can be helpful or not helpful and what our go-tos are, was really great. And then another one that I'm going to be holding on to, and I've really just been chewing on a lot, is actually this last month, which was hope. It's just the world that we live in right now is in such need of hope. I think we came out of the pandemic and people were hopeful that there would be kind of a new way that the world worked and that work worked and that families connected with each other. And the pandemic was incredibly challenging, but there were some great takeaways. But then here we are, we've kind of muddled through, and there's lots of, by every measure, the economy is doing incredibly well, but public sentiment about the economy and about their jobs and about their future for their families is really low. So it's almost become more and more clear that a challenge that we face right now as leaders really is about building hope and helping people understand how they can access resource and abilities to grow and all the things that a lot of folks, I think, just don't believe are possible or likely in their organizations. So I don't know. I mean, for me, thinking through the modules and the months and the conversations we've had, those are a couple that I'm going to be working with, I think, for the balance of 2024, moving through it.
What are kind of your similar reflections? What are you hoping people will take away, and what have you found most powerful?
It goes back to some of the things we've already talked about, right? But the additional layer to that is, Luke alluded to some of these topics of how we apply that, using reflection to get really clear on how our strengths show up when we are operating in our strengths versus not. How as leaders we can create teams where people are leaning into their strengths rather than trying to fit people into roles, and where it's just not a good fit for them. So as we reflect on these things and we create the space to reflect, whether that's through just pausing or we have an intentional practice where we write things down and reflect on paper, things just become a lot clearer, right? When we look at our values, how are we clear? Have we articulated what our personal values are as an organization? Have we articulated what our values are and how do those show up? And how do we create alignment between our own personal values and the values of the organization? Is there alignment? And if there isn't, what do we do about it? And that also feeds into our mindset. You know, how can we intentionally choose to expand or shift our mindset in a way that's more helpful, that's more outward? Chris alluded to that inward versus outward aspect of mindset. We talk about growth mindset, right? Can we shift our mindset by being intentional to be more growth oriented, more outwardly focused on impact on the people around us? So yeah, I just find all of this a really helpful framework. And I know for me, as I reflect, towards the end of this year, looking at how I can be more intentional about each of these topics is going to be really helpful. My word for this year was cultivate, and looking at how can I cultivate my strengths and the strengths of others? How can I cultivate value alignment? How can I cultivate a more helpful mindset in myself and people that I lead or people that I have influence with? How can I cultivate more helpful ways to behave under pressure and to be intentional about how we choose our, when we get into survival mode, when we're under pressure, right? Our default, I heard a really helpful quote the other day. Your initial default reaction does not tell you who you are. How you intentionally choose to respond after that initial reaction tells you who you are becoming. And that was really powerful for me, right? Because we all have reactions, we all have wiring, and a lot of our reaction when we're under pressure and under stress is involuntary, right? It happens before we have had time to consciously reflect and respond. And when we recognize that if we had a response that was unhelpful, if that creates a rupture in a relationship, we can repair, and we can choose to be intentional about that repair. And we can choose to be intentional about how we respond moving forward. We're growing, right? And so for me, it's about cultivating each of these things, right? And it starts with me. This is about self-leadership. And then it's about how I can help to influence and lead others in those same ways.
You bet. And I think, what you said about there's really only two types of response, helpful or not helpful.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I become concrete in this idea that there's only two behaviors that exist in this world, helpful and not helpful. So it's a pretty nice lens to put things through. And I don't know, like our listeners may not be aware, but throughout this year, we've really spent a considerable amount of time building programming around excellence wins. And there's this whole idea of being a person, or maybe it's being a leader of excellence. In the crux of that idea is that I respond in helpful ways and choose to be excellent, even when other people do not.
Mm-hmm.
So my situation, like things that I'm not in control of, the influences other people or organizations have upon me, I do not control, but I control how I respond. And can I remain helpful?
Mm-hmm.
I think even that is anchored to intention. We have to be intentional about being helpful if we're going to be an exemplary or excellent leader. and really make those contributions that allow our teams to win, to allow me to grow and responsibility as I move forward through my career. And also, like, it makes me different. Anyone can respond emotionally and unhelpful. Anyone can do it. It's an average behavior. That's why, the simple fact that anyone can do it makes it average. And I think I think the world wants us to, like, there's gravity in the fat part of the bell curve. And we feel ourselves constantly drawn to it, whether it's like, oh, people are going to think I'm weird if I emerge this idea, or if I just go do, I'm at risk, right? I'm moving from that fat part of the bell curve to a right skew with ideas and behaviors that don't look like this. The stuff that's average is underperforming. The ability to make an impact and be a person of excellence is a right skew. That's why I call them 1% behaviors. Like, there are things that the courageous folks are able to go out there and do. And it's why my purpose is not to connect with leaders. I don't really, like, the leaders in the fat part of the bell curve aren't helpful. They're just creating more gravity for the fat part of the bell curve, creating gravity for average. Courageous leaders are out here on the edge with a set intention, with interventions, with a plan, with reflection, with courage. And it's the courage that makes those leaders different. And those are the ones I'm here to serve. That's my purpose. Like, connect with courageous leaders, the ones that are right skewed, that really make things happen and move our world forward. And we can all impact it in that small way. And so that's kind of my takeaway, my kind of last and final thought. But I want to open it up. Hannah, Luke, what are your kind of parting shots here as we close an entire season on intentional leadership and start looking at 2024?
Yeah, well, I'll just go back to what I said at the beginning. I am the lever, right? We, just like you said, we can't depend on other people to show us the way. If we want to lead in an exemplary way, like, we are the answer to that problem. So how do we figure that out? That doesn't mean doing it alone. I mean, it probably means we need to ask for more help intentionally, but we are going to have to be the part of the system that changes and not waiting for anyone else. So for me, that's the big takeaway. I'm really excited about 2024. I think we have some big announcements about the podcast and where we're going with it that will be coming out soon. But I mean, you guys know, I don't know if the listeners know this, but, like, we have been really, really busy and growing and having amazing conversations with clients. And I think 2024 is going to be a really exciting year for us as a team, for me, as I think about how do I continue to prioritize in life and serve clients well. And I have 3 teenagers now, and there's just 2024 is going to be action packed. And so becoming a leader that can manage kind of an action packed organization and family is something that is a little intimidating, but I'm also excited about. And I think we'll definitely have plenty of time to talk about that on Magic in the Room in 2024.
Absolutely. Anna?
Yeah, I want to go back to this notion of hope, which was our final topic in this series, right? Hope is the belief that the future can be better than today, and that I have the power to make it so. So as leaders, when we can envision a better future and we can share that vision in a way that's inspiring, right? And help people create pathways for how to be able to get to that place that's better than where we are today. And then instill agency in people, right? Instill that belief that I have the power to make a difference. I have the power to make change. When we become champions of hope as intentional leaders, that's when we can have real impact in the world, and the world really needs it. And so I think for me, going into, wrapping up this year and going into next year, I think that's what I want to take with me of how can I become a more intentional champion of hope for everyone around me, whether it's in my family or in organizations that I serve, every context that I show up.
You bet. And man, it has been an awesome year. We exit this year, guys, as we head into 24. I think about the iterations of our guest service training. I think about building, brand informed leadership, excellence wins, just our leadership development programming, whether it's lead yourself, lead teams, lead people, lead organizations, and unlocking EQ, now data-driven storytelling, 7 principles of operational excellence, just all these things that we love to work with companies and organizations around, in addition to strategic planning. Like, as we work through these as principles, they inevitably show up in the work we're taking to our client partners. And I don't think it's out of bounds to say once a year, let's get a nice plug in there for some things that we actually do. But Hannah, you want to let them know where to find us?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you can find us on purposeandperformancegroup.com. That's our website. We're on all the social media outlets. And our podcast, Magic in the Room, is hosted by Chris Province, Hannah Broderud, and Luke Freeman. It is produced by Ben West. Social media management is by Emma Holland and Maggie King Robinson. Our theme music is by Evan Brim. You can find his music on Apple Music. This episode was recorded remotely in Oklahoma and in Montana. Magic in the Room is a production of Purpose and Performance Group. You can find us, as mentioned, at purposeandperformancegroup.com and previous episodes of this podcast at magicintheroom.com.
And thank you all for an amazing season, for your friendship. I could not imagine having more amazing colleagues, and I feel fortunate every day to do work with you. Thank you all.
Thank you, and likewise.
Ditto.